Hey guys, it's Kendra.
And this is Jessica, and you're listening to
Lucid Lab. We are both headed out of town in the next few days, so I'm feeling a little stressed today. Just so much going on.
Me
trying
too.
to get it all done. So we're
way too stressed.
Just trying to, get too much done as working moms. And now, add in going out of town.
And then on top of it, this week with work just seemed overkill.
It was excessive.
I don't know. I haven't slept. Typical.
I feel the same. I mean, it's not typical for me not to sleep, but I've gotten less sleep this week than usual. Just, I think too much on my brain, maybe.
Well, we are managing a million different things. So it's almost impossible to fall asleep because then I'm trying to remember, I have these 20 other things that I need to do. And it's been a real time management thing for me this week because I've had to literally schedule everything that I'm doing throughout the day. And I'm like, I know it takes me 2 hours to do that. I need to leave time for that. And I still have like 40 more things to do before I leave. So
I haven't had a problem falling asleep, but I've been waking up at like 5 a.m. And it's like my brain is, and you need to do this and you need to do this. And I just wake up already racing, which is not good. So
no, it's stressful.
Anyways, I'm sure some of you guys out there can relate.
Yeah. But I'm excited because I'm going to Estes.
Yes, you are.
Again. And I actually am going to do one of the Stanley tours this
are
time.
You?
Yeah.
Which one are y'all doing?
I think it's the evening one.
That's cool. Are you going to go see the frozen dead guy?
Well, if we can, if they let us, I guess so.
I guess there's a whole museum there. So tell me about it. I didn't know it until we did that episode.
I'll take pictures.
Yeah, and I'm headed to California to see my oldest child who moved there in January. So I'm really excited to go see this part of California. It's northern, right outside of Sacramento, kind of in the mountains.
Did you say it's near Yosemite?
Yes, we're going to Yosemite for one night as well. It's a really quick trip. I'm only going to be there for 4 days, but Yosemite's, I think, about a 2-hour drive. So we're going to go up there and check it out.
And watch out for serial killers.
It's okay. We're going to have plenty of people. There's going to be 4 of us in the room. I'll have my mace. I don't know. Try me.
Well, that'll be fun.
Yes. It'll be nice to get out of town for a little bit.
The weather should be good too. Our weather still is ridiculous and whatever here. I woke up to 6 inches of snow yesterday.
This whole last 3 days has been really crappy weather. And I've had to drive a lot because I've just had different things going on and driving longer distances. And I swear every time I'd get on the road was right when the snow would start hitting like whiteout conditions. And that's always stressful to drive in.
Yeah. And just a couple days before that, it was like almost 80 degrees. So
and then today
it's a very confusing time.
I was just looking at the outlook and it's going to be like 80 degrees again on Wednesday.
It's making it hard to know what to dress my daughter in because I think it was Friday that I woke up and I had this whole outfit for her. And then I looked outside and I was like, scratch that. You need snowshoes.
and a jacket and gloves and a hat. It was cold.
Yeah, it was freezing.
I had to turn my fireplace on. Who would think you'd be doing that in late April? But you are.
Always. I think it can snow until June, like we've said.
True. We just got to get used to it.
We just ignore it. Once we get our first bit of nice weather, we're like, we're good. And then
it's summertime,
comes,
right?
And then we're like, oh, shit.
I guess I still need my sweatshirt and my boots.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when Drew's oldest son graduated, it was late May and I had picked out like a sundress and all of that. And same thing happened. It snowed.
Oh.
And it was an outside graduation and we were all there bundled up and I was wearing like the one winter outfit I still had in my closet. Didn't even look nice, but I'm like, who cares? It's 30 degrees outside.
It's always a risk to dress one way or another around this time or to have anything outside, really.
So what are we doing today?
So I decided to follow your lead with talking about the Sally House, and I'm going to talk about a haunted place as well.
Ooh.
We are going to be talking about the Waverly Hills Sanatorium.
I have heard of this one. I think I may have seen like a Ghost Hunters.
Oh, there's so much on it. So much.
Yes.
I think it's been done by everybody.
Yeah.
So it feels kind of silly to do an episode on it, to be honest. But maybe you haven't heard of it and you'll have some fun listening to the history of this place because there's quite a bit of history.
Okay.
So it's nestled in the rolling hills of Louisville, Kentucky. This once grand institution was established to treat tuberculosis patients, which we know was a common and often fatal disease in the early 20th century.
Yeah.
The sanatorium has a rich history that spans over several decades. As the years passed, Waverly Hills evolved from a place of hope and healing to a symbol of tragedy and mystery. Reportedly, there are over 8,000 people who died there, although some sources claim it could be less at 3,500 or way more, up to 63,000 during its operation.
63,000?
A lot. We're going to discuss why there's such a discrepancy.
Yeah, it's quite a big discrepancy, like 60,000 difference.
And why some deaths may have not been reported through the hospital.
Like it was a cover-up?
There's a lot of reasons, so we're going to come back to that. Regardless, the sanatorium has earned a reputation as one of the most haunted places in the United States, possibly even the world. It closed its doors in 1961. Although some tried to use the property for other purposes, the building lay abandoned for decades. Today, Waverly Hills stands as a popular destination for ghost hunters and history enthusiasts, drawing visitors from around the world who are eager to explore its dark and storied history. Before going into the haunted side of things, we have to look at the history, which to me is the best part because often the history is much scarier than the hauntings of a location.
It is true, and it leads to why it's haunted in the first place.
And before we talk about the land and the building itself, we have to talk about tuberculosis. We skimmed it a bit way back in the day when Kendrick covered the Stanley Hotel.
Yes.
But given this was a tuberculosis hospital, I think a deeper dive is in order.
Okay.
Tuberculosis has a very long history throughout the world, possibly something that has been around as long as humans and maybe even before that in different forms in animals that evolved into what it is now.
Interesting.
Some even refer to tuberculosis as the first disease known to mankind. And because of its lengthy history, it goes by many names, but most of us know it either by its name and the abbreviation TB, or consumption, phthisis, the Great White Plague, or just White Death. The earliest known evidence of TB is from 9,000 years ago, from human remains in a settlement in eastern Mediterranean. Although there has been a recent study suggesting that it started around 6,000 years ago and is linked to animal domestication and farming.
So we got it from like cows or something?
Cows are the other animal on the planet that is most known to have tuberculosis.
Okay.
Signs of the disease have been found in Egyptian mummies dating 3000 to 2400 BC. But there is controversial evidence that tuberculosis lesions were found on a 500,000-year-old Homo erectus fossil.
Interesting, like that they can see that from a fossil.
I think it's specific to those lesions.
Well, that's what they do with the TB test, right? Is you see the lesion if you have it or something like that.
There are a lot of different ways that tuberculosis presents itself, and there's different forms, so it just depends. But anyway, that means that it could have been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
Tuberculosis reached its peak in the 1800s. At one point, it caused nearly 25% of all deaths.
That's a lot. Damn.
Worldwide, it is estimated to be responsible for 2 billion deaths.
Wow.
It was known as the robber of youth, as babies and young children's immune systems weren't fully formed yet. Younger people 15 to 25 and 65 and older were at higher risk of contracting active tuberculosis. And the same goes for today and other viruses we know to reach these epidemic levels.
It's crazy that it's still around today. Like it doesn't seem like something any of us think about, but I'm sure in parts of the world it still affects people.
Oh, yes. And actually there's an increase currently.
That's scary.
And that's because there's now drug-resistant strains of TB.
Oh, fuck.
So there is a concern, actually, now for the rise of it.
Yeah. I don't even want to think about all the medical scare. Like they're saying there's fungal infections that have gotten so bad they can't fix them. And now antibiotic resistant.
Yeah. And
everything.
Tuberculosis was already hard to treat even with the antibiotics as it was. So there's never been a cure-all. It's like a combination of drugs. I don't have this written down anywhere, but I think it was the rise of AIDS that started to cause these drug-resistant strains of TB.
Interesting. So it's like they all find a way to evolve as well, no matter what we do.
Exactly. TB is a serious infectious disease. It's caused by a bacteria that mainly affects the lungs, but it can attack any part of the body: kidneys, lymph nodes, digestive organs, bones, the spine, or the brain.
Wow.
It used to have an extremely high death rate among those with active TB, clearly, but not everyone infected with TB becomes sick. That's the other scary thing about this.
So
it's very deadly, but some people don't die from it.
So it can just kind of lay dormant in your body?
It's a lingering disease. Symptoms come and go and can progress slowly over many years, like with Freeland Stanley,
right,
who built the Stanley.
Right.
Because he lived into old age, but he had tuberculosis his entire life.
Yeah, he dealt with it and it would flare up and go back and flare up.
Some people are lucky to have it like that, but other people can die quickly.
Right.
If you do become sick and it goes untreated or it doesn't go dormant, it will lead to the inability to maintain blood oxygen levels. And that's what leads to death, among other horrific things it's doing inside your body.
Right. That's very reminiscent of what just happened with COVID, was all about blood oxygen levels too.
Still today, it's difficult to diagnose because, like with other things, symptoms at first resemble the flu. And that's just with like any respiratory disease.
That's the hard part of being a parent, is your kid gets sick.
I know.
You're like, is this just a cold?
Right.
Is it
Cough,
the flu?
high fever, weakness.
Or is my child going to die because now it's going to turn into tuberculosis or meningitis or all the other things that start with the flu?
Right. It's terrifying, really, because you want to just be like, oh, it's just a little virus. She'll get over it in 2 days or whatever. But the truth is you don't know.
No.
With tuberculosis, cysts form in the lungs.
Ouch.
As bacteria multiply and erode blood vessels in the lungs, it leads to hemoptysis, or coughing up blood, which is now synonymous with TB.
Yes.
But it is not just blood. You're also coughing up tubercles, which are masses of tissue, blood, and phlegm.
Wow.
The final stages of tuberculosis include sunken cheeks, hollow eyes, swollen extremities, diarrhea, and respiratory rattle, or what is known as the death rattle. If not consumed by all of the other symptoms, some drown in their own blood as they start to hemorrhage from the nose and the mouth due to the ruptured blood vessels. So it's a very painful disease.
Horrible way to go.
Those with active TB can infect others through sneezing, coughing, spitting, or even just breathing in close contact. So it's highly contagious.
Wow.
You can be around people with TB, but just don't get too close, is kind of the gist.
Okay. I don't want to get close to any
person
because anymore.
You just have to inhale a little bit of the particles to get it. Unfortunately, it is a scary one.
And they're coughing. So there's lots of particles to be had.
And they can hang around in the air for a while. Tuberculosis in many ways has had a profound impact on our culture as well. Many famous works of literature, operas, and plays were influenced by TB, like Les Miserables. It's a recurring theme in film and television even today, striking down young and beautiful characters, like in Moulin Rouge.
One of my favorite movies.
Artists depicted TB in their work as a symbol of morality and the human condition, like Edvard Munch's work, The Sick Child. It's a collection of paintings showing the moment before death, depicting his older sister, Johann Sophie's struggle with TB. She died at 15. He too got the disease, and the work is thought to be his expression of guilt to be the one who made it, but also just in remembrance of her. The social attitudes towards TB changed over time. For a time, TB was popular in a way. It was considered the artist's disease.
So it was like chic?
It was highly romanticized. The disease itself makes the victims lose weight, lose color, and look sickly, but that became the beauty standard to look pale and thin and on death's doorstep.
I mean, we've seen that with the whole heroin chic thing.
To die from tuberculosis is brutal, but it was seen as a kind disease by taking its time and allowing people to get things in order.
I guess that's one way to look at it.
Young upper-class women would purposefully pale their skin to achieve the consumptive appearance.
This is so... Our beauty standards have always been fucked up.
And don't forget the rosy cheeks, red lips, or sparkling or dilated eyes. Looking like you had a fever and just coughed up blood was attractive. And it influenced Victorian fashion with the clinched waists. The look of young women in a gradual build toward death was entwined with feminine beauty for a very long time, even after scientists made advances in knowing what the cause and spread was. There was an effort to stop this by blaming women's long skirts as one of the culprits for dragging about and transporting the disease.
It's always women's fault.
They swept up the germs off the street and took them home.
That is ridiculous.
Then they went after the women's corsets. Tuberculosis was exacerbated by limiting circulation of blood and movement of the lungs, A softer elastic corset was introduced as a replacement. It was called the health corset. But it wasn't just the women under attack for their appearance and beauty standards. For men of the time, it was ideal that they sport a hefty, sculpted, luxurious beard and extravagant mustaches and sideburns.
Okay. How does that help?
No, this doesn't help.
Okay.
That was along the lines of what the women were trying to do to look like they were consumptive. Men just had these massive beards that were also a problem.
Okay.
Although the popularity of a big beard was also to keep men's faces warm in war, and in the United States, beards were easier to have because razors were difficult to use and unsafe.
Yeah. Yeah. Straight razors.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen Sweeney Todd.
Right? Exactly. Either way, beards and mustaches had to go. They were not safe. They were germ magnets. In a 1960 magazine article looking to convince men to shave it all off, an American doctor, Edwin Bowers, said, "There is no way of computing the number of bacteria and noxious germs that may lurk in the Amazonian jungles of a well-whiskered face. But
Gross.
their number must be legion. Measles, scarlet fever, diphtheria, tuberculosis, whooping cough, common and uncommon colds, and a host of other infectious diseases can be, and undoubtedly are, transmitted via the whisker route."
So I should not make out with well-bearded men.
It just grossed me out. It's like some guys look good with beards and mustaches.
Yeah.
Some can't go without.
No.
They've tried and they look so fucking...
They look
like aliens.
Or a baby. They have no chin.
Right. Exactly. No jawlines. I don't know. I can't help but think of how germy they are and how I don't want them in the nether regions.
No. And it kind of hurts down there too.
It's different if they're cleaning it very often, but it's understandable that it can be a host for other things.
Yes.
After this, things did start to change. American men, especially doctors, adopted the clean-shaven look. They needed to lead the way to look more hygienic. And women, although the makeup style hasn't really continued, well, I mean, it has in a way, but it's not the beauty standard anymore, at least.
The pale.
Right, the pale skin. But they did change the length of skirts of women.
Oh.
This allowed shoes to finally have their day.
Oh.
And shoes became an important part of everyday style, often being the statement piece of an outfit.
And still are.
Yep. This change also led to tanning, though, opposite of what we just talked about, when doctors started to suggest sunbathing as a way to fight against tuberculosis.
So that's where it started.
Yep. Unfortunately, it's still a thing.
Yeah.
I'm pretty fair. I remember being jealous of the girls that could tan.
Me too.
Now I could care less, thank God.
Now I shun the sun, but I had my days where I laid out to get golden.
Skin cancer should not be the goal.
No.
So take care of yourself. But also don't use sunblock. So there's a lot of chemicals in that too.
So sunblock is bad for you, and then also spray tan is bad for you. So what do you do?
We just shouldn't exist anymore.
Just stay inside all the time.
Don't do anything. But then there's vitamin D deficiencies that cause all kinds of problems. So that's fun. But with all this, tuberculosis went from being something admired in a way to being something else entirely. It shaped social attitudes towards health and hygiene. The fear of contagion led to increased awareness of public health and the importance of cleanliness and sanitation.
Well, that's a good byproduct of all this.
It's true, but it's something that was not readily available to the poor. There was an effort to stop people from spitting in the streets. They started to provide those little spitting...
Spittoons.
Yeah, whatever those are called. But the isolation and stigma associated with TB had an impact on the mental health of very many. Instead of it being a sexy artist disease to have, you became an untouchable. Many people infected were often forced into isolation from society and faced significant psychological challenges. Concentration and contraction of tuberculosis grew as workers and families moved into cities with the rise of the Industrial Revolution. Sanitation was horrible at this time. Many families had generations in one tiny space. Overcrowding, coupled with poor living conditions, poor nutrition, and lack of fresh air, it was the optimal environment for the disease to spread.
Yeah. It's just like the Black Plague was the same kind of right conditions for it to just take off.
But once again, as we see this happen time and time again throughout history, the poor were more susceptible and suffered. In the late 19th century, 70 to 90% of urban populations were infected, and 80% of those infected died.
70 to 90% infected?
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Although there were many theories throughout the centuries, or millennia really, about what led to getting tuberculosis and were certainly stepping stones, it wasn't until the late 19th century that Prussian physician Robert Koch found the causal agent for the disease. Before this, there were many beliefs as to what might lead a person to have TB. In ancient times, the cause was thought to be from excess phlegm or black bile. Some thought it was due to the emotional stress or psychological factors. Some said it was because of sugar intake or the acidity of blood. Others, the lack of protein or vitamin D.
Okay.
Because the infected suffered from poor nutrition and lack of appetite, it seemed like a viable cause, but consumption, as it comes to be known, was named so because it consumes the individual from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
Many believed it was hereditary because it ran in families, when in truth it was because family members were more likely to be in close quarters together.
Yeah.
This later bled into the theory that it is contagious for the same reasons, but still the exact mechanism of transmission was not understood until Robert published his findings. But that wouldn't be possible either without René Laennec. René studied contagious patients and bodies, ultimately contracting the disease and dying at 45. But before he did, he invented the stethoscope in 1816.
He's busy.
Which for a long time was the only way to diagnose a patient. Colleagues of his continued his work and revealed other important factors in determining what exactly tuberculosis was. The fact that it was contagious was proven by Jean-Antoine Villemin in 1869 when he took tuberculosis matter from human cadavers and injected them into poor rabbits, which then became infected.
Poor bunnies.
I know, they've done so much for us.
Yeah.
Poor bunnies.
We just grab them and say, hey,
we're going
try
to
this out.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it was Robert in 1882 who discovered Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Before this, he also discovered the causal agent for anthrax. So this guy had some notches in his belt.
Yeah, he's doing a lot for the world.
He made the results public on March 24th, 1882. And to this day, March 24th is known as World Tuberculosis Day.
Okay.
13 years later, Wilhelm Röntgen discovered the X-ray, which allowed physicians to diagnose and track the progression of the disease. But tuberculosis didn't always show up right away. In some, it lay dormant for years. Often symptoms don't show until a person is far along, which made finding somewhere for infected individuals to stay away from the general public a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to the rise of the sanatorium.
Okay.
Although there were efforts by some to isolate the sick before this. Before medical advances, treatment for tuberculosis was lots of fresh air, gentle exercise, and a really good diet.
Okay.
One man came up with the idea to house some infected folk in a cave with the thought that cave air was pure compared to other sources of fresh air.
Okay.
Dr. John Croghan of Louisville, Kentucky bought Mammoth Cave in 1839 because you can just buy caves.
Back in those days, you could buy everything.
It was meant to be an underground village for consumptives and invalids. 15 patients moved into this cave in October and November of 1842 in hopes that the cool temp and cave air would cure their disease.
But then they got depressed because they never saw the sunshine.
And turned into vampires. They lived in stone-constructed huts, and living there only sped up the process.
Probably, yeah.
This adventure did not last long. By January and February of 1843, just a few months later, 2 had died in the cave and the rest left. One lodger, Oliver Hazard Perry Anderson, said that he looked worse coming out than he did before going in.
Not surprising.
All remaining patients died 3 days to 3 weeks after resurfacing.
Oh, man.
And Dr. Croghan, after contracting the disease himself, died at his home in 1849. So, nice thought. Didn't work. Shortly after this, the first sanatorium dedicated to the treatment of tuberculosis was opened in Silesia in 1854. It was developed based on the medical theory of Hermann Bremer, a German physician who was convinced that tuberculosis came from the difficulty of the heart to correctly irrigate the lungs. He suggested that locations well above sea level where the atmospheric pressure was less, would help the heart function more effectively.
Which was, in theory, correct because
it's true.
Higher elevation seemed to help TB patients.
Right. He didn't go too far up, though. He only went to about 2,500.
Oh, yeah,
I believe this
enough.
is where this hospital was. But after 3 years, he published his findings along with a surviving patient who had some words to say. Sanatoriums started to pop up in Germany and throughout Europe. And that surviving patient named Peter opened his own sanatorium, later claiming that out of the 1,022 patients that were there, 132 were completely cured after their stay. It's possible, but it might be that person's genetics
just overcame the disease.
Correct.
Every time you say sanatorium, I can't help but think about that song by Metallica. Do you know it?
Yes, of course.
It's just like playing through my head the whole time you say that. So I'm trying to
don't
pay attention.
Me.
I know.
Now you're distracting me. Now I have a theme song going on while I'm trying to read. Thanks.
You're welcome, everyone. Now you all have it. I had to share.
Sanatoriums started to show up in America as well. In 1884, the Adirondack Cottage Sanatorium was founded by Dr. Edward Livingston Trudeau in Saranac Lake, New York. Today, it still functions as the Trudeau Institute, where they study infectious diseases. Shortly after that, the Sharon Sanatorium was built near Boston in 1890. But sanatoriums weren't for everyone. The lower class didn't have such access, so clinics or dispensaries were opened up in cities. Sanatoriums for the upper class offered excellent care and constant medical attention. For those with lower income, they more or less resembled prisons. Not surprising. In 1904, an organization to fight tuberculosis was founded, the National Association for the Study and Treatment of Tuberculosis, which was founded by Edward Trudeau, along with Robert Hall Babcock, Henry Martin Hall, Lawrence Flick, and S. Adolphus Knopf. This came after the world's first Society for the Prevention of Tuberculosis, which was founded in 1892 by Flick in Pennsylvania. Today, the National Tuberculosis Association is known by something more of us recognize, and that's the American Lung Association. And that brings us to Kentucky, where Waverly Hills was built.
Yes.
Or will be built.
So this whole time, I keep hearing you say sanatorium, and I'm, of course, singing the song in my head, which is sanitarium.
Yeah.
So I have been looking at you this whole time thinking that you're just mispronouncing it. So we were having an offline discussion about this. So I think other listeners might be stupid like me too.
No.
So,
but it's okay. When you brought up the song, my brain was just like, okay. No, because a sanitarium is for mentally ill patients. Sanatoriums are for the sick.
And that's why when I hear Waverly Hills, I always thought it said sanitarium, and that's why I assumed it was an insane asylum. So
Gotcha.
Okay.
I mean, they did have a ward for it because those people get sick too. But
true. And some people might have mental illness caused by the disease.
It's true. You lose your mind a little bit when you're constantly preoccupied with dying.
Mm-hmm.
So before the sanatorium was built, the land was owned by Major Thomas H. Hayes. He purchased the land in 1883 to build his new family home. Because they were decently far away from everything, he built a single-room schoolhouse on the property for his young daughter. He hired a school teacher by the name of Lizzie Lee Harris. The school didn't have a name yet, and she suggested Waverly because she loved Walter Scott's Waverly novels.
Okay.
Major Hayes liked the name so much that he named his property Waverly Hills.
Okay.
Meanwhile, tuberculosis was on the rise in Kentucky. Why was Kentucky such a hotbed for tuberculosis? Well, it's because of the warm, wet weather and city centers.
Okay.
In the early 1900s, TB was the leading cause of death in the United States, with an estimated 700,000 to 800,000 cases reported annually. But here in Kentucky, to many, a sanatorium was needed, but the money needed to buy land and build them wasn't easy to come by. It wasn't a requirement to isolate individuals with tuberculosis at the time, so help from the government wasn't there.
That's so surprising.
At first, yeah. The Kentucky Anti-Tuberculosis Association, later called the Louisville Anti-Tuberculosis Association, raised the funds needed to build the first hospital and 2 dispensaries. In October of 1907, the first hospital opened, which was called Hazelwood Sanatorium. but it wasn't much of a facility and only had room to house 8 male and 8 female patients.
Yeah, that's not a lot.
And you had to be white and you had to pay for it.
So white and rich.
Yeah. Of course, there were plans to expand, but tuberculosis cases were growing, especially in the Louisville area, as it was the largest city in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, Louisville had one of the highest tuberculosis death rates in America, and it was the #1 cause of death there.
Wow.
Under the Louisville Association, a board of tuberculosis hospital was formed. And the year before Hazelwood opened, Kentucky's Governor J.C.W. Beckham signed off on a bill to further tax its citizens for the building of a large public hospital, as the private hospital was only serving
rich people.
Yeah, exactly.
That were white.
Yep. While waiting for the funds to build, they searched for property and they found the perfect location, Waverly Hills. The board purchased the land and broke ground in 1908, and they decided to keep the name. Although the original Waverly was spelt with an extra E, and at some point that was dropped, and no one really knows why.
Because that's not how you spell it.
Because it needs to be their Waverly Hills.
Right.
Waverly Hills was going to offer free board and treatment to both white and black people, although separated, of course.
Well, that was
It's kind at first,
but not later.
I have some words.
Okay.
You'll see.
Of course. I was about to say
No one's nice back then. What are you talking about?
Okay, so they put all the people who were not white in the basement and strapped them to their beds, probably.
We're going to go through all the history.
I know. Hold my thoughts.
Hold your horses. It took 2 years for the first version of the building to be built, along with 2 connected open-air pavilions. Initially, the facility was built for 40 patients. Waverly Hills Sanatorium officially opened on July 26, 1910. The old Hayes home was used as housing for some of the nurses. The main building was 2 stories. The first floor was offices, a laboratory, the staff dining room, and a classroom for nurses. The second floor was housing for the rest of the nurses. And the back part of the building and the open-air pavilions were for patients. There was also a kitchen, storeroom, and ice refrigeration room. Laundry and additional living quarters for employees were in the basement. So not yet.
Okay, but soon. How do the nurses and the employees keep from getting sick?
They don't.
And the doctors, yeah.
They don't.
No.
It's a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Even though it was meant for both white and black patients, white patients got admittance first. So there weren't any black patients yet.
Because they were giving all the priority to the white people.
Exactly. One pavilion was for the men and the other was for the women. But it doesn't sound like there was a lot of room for patients overall, based on everything I just
40,
listed.
Right? Yeah.
And that's because there wasn't, and they were immediately at capacity.
Well, if they're in the area with the highest rate.
I know. We needed aliens to help build faster.
Yeah.
Within a year, the main hospital in town was shutting its doors to tear down the building and make way for a new $1 million hospital. But it announced that it would no longer take tuberculosis patients once it reopened.
That's like the main reason people need a hospital, but
you do have to separate them.
I kind of get it.
You don't want your daughter who broke her arm or something going to the hospital and then getting TB.
Yeah. Or somebody going in for any kind of surgery.
Right, exactly.
Like, yeah, I can see, but it sucks since that's the
because
number
there's
one disease
obviously
at the time.
nothing there yet to help them otherwise.
Right.
But that meant the current patients needed somewhere to go. Temporary tents were set up on the land at Waverly Hills for the displaced TB patients. But they weren't so temporary. Patients remained in those tents for a year and a half.
Ugh.
And this was because construction was constantly happening to expand the hospital and its property. In 1913, a 2-story building for 50 beds was opened, which was over a quarter mile away downhill from the original building. So patients had to either walk or be wheeled there. This building was for advanced cases. Still segregated, of course, but all living in the same conditions. So this was probably the only point in time where they were being treated similarly.
Because they're about to die and they're like, might as well be kind of nice.
In the beginning. Yeah. All beds were partially open rooms and all faced out to the view of the country. By 1914, there were 170 beds, and since its opening to this time, over 1,000 patients were admitted.
Wait, they only had 170 beds, and they already had 1,000 patients, so that means a lot are just dying?
Dying or leaving.
Okay.
One of the two. But with that many people, considering that many were parents, there was a need to care for children, both sick and not sick, because
nobody else could.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There wasn't anywhere for them to go, or they had no family to watch them.
Mm-hmm.
And no hospitals in Louisville were accepting children with TB.
What? So children were just left at home to die with their parents?
No, they had to go somewhere. It was essentially a TB tent city. And it's not like tents like how you think of, like they were on wooden structures.
Right.
So they were more permanent in a way. But
I guess it's the same thing that we saw happen during the COVID thing, right? Where they were just throwing everything up.
What they can. Yeah.
Because this is overwhelming their capacity.
Yep.
All the time, because so many people are just getting sick all the time.
Yep. No facility is ever going to be prepared for epidemic levels.
Right.
But we're not at epidemic levels on a daily basis. So having the resources for it doesn't make sense money-wise unless it happens. So
having all those beds that would be empty when it's not an epidemic.
Right. That's why they do have to have plans in place for this basketball stadium is going to turn into this, if this happens or whatnot.
The scary part is when these kinds of things happen is how do you find the health workers to support?
Especially after COVID. People don't want to do that shit again. They were treated so badly.
And many of them died first. They were some of the first ones to die.
And they were forced to use certain methods and procedures that they knew were killing the patients. And it wasn't helping. It was actually killing the patients.
The ventilators that were just infecting people.
Yeah.
After going through COVID, I'm afraid, and I hope to God that we never see another one in my lifetime, because we know we're not prepared. And that wasn't even in the scheme of things bad compared to tuberculosis or Black Plague or any of that.
Yep.
Ebola. Ooh, that's the one that scares me the most.
That's the one that scares me the most. Yep. And how can we not? It's Outbreak. Outbreak ruined all of us.
Yeah. What was the one with Gwyneth Paltrow? Contagion?
Contagion.
That one scares me. Yep. That one's really, really made me think about things.
Right. In fact, when I mentioned the basketball stadium, I thought of her dying inside that gym.
Yeah.
Anyway.
On that nice thought, let's keep going.
A small open-aired facility or /school opened at the end of 1911 before a larger children's pavilion was constructed and opened in 1916. So long waits here.
5 years.
This was only for white children, though. Black children were housed with the adult Black patients, which meant that Black children during their years there never received any schooling. What was also said about this time is that children were literally being ripped away from their homes if they were suspected to have come in contact with the disease. They didn't force adults to Waverly Hills, but they would remove children and take them to Waverly Hills.
That's really sad and scary for those children.
And that's one of my worst nightmares, is someone coming and taking my kid from me.
I was scared of that in COVID because they were doing that over in China.
And then we had to somehow be okay sending our kids to school when it was opened. So there was a lot going on. There's a lot of stuff going on.
I keep bringing back to COVID because that's all we know, but
it's our only real comparison. But even with the additions, they were still way over capacity. At least double the amount of intended patients were there.
Wow.
And there was a really long waiting list, which included many soldiers from the First World War.
Oh, sad.
Treatment then was the same for everyone. If you had a high fever, you had to stay in bed until you were fever-free for at least 6 consecutive days. And the schedule otherwise was as follows. 6:30 a.m., whistle blows, you wake up, you get out of bed, unless you were one of those that was required to stay in bed. 7 o'clock was breakfast. After breakfast, nurses would take your temperature, respiration, and pulses. At 10, everyone had milk.
Does a body good.
At 12:30 was lunch. Everyone was required to nap from 1 to 3. At 3, you had milk again. Temps were taken again. Dinner was at 5:30. Then temp checks again, and lights were out at 9:30, which was preceded by flashing lights all over the buildings that started at 9:15. So it was very
regimented.
It really was, which I don't want to ever be a part of.
No, hospital care.
6:30.
That's fucking early.
It's fucking early.
Especially when you're sick, your body needs even more rest.
I know.
And hospitals are supposed to cater their care to the individual.
In fact, they do the opposite now, because when I am trying to get rest at a hospital, they interrupt me every 20 minutes.
Oh, the nurses? Yeah.
I wake up.
Gotta check your blood pressure.
I never get any sleep at hospitals. It sucks.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, the only time I've been in a hospital is having my babies. And it was. It's like right when I finally am getting rest and the baby's sleeping, there they come in. Let's check everything.
I was hospitalized for an infection that was caused by surgery. Got really, really bad. And all I wanted to do was rest. And I didn't sleep the entire time I was there. And I deserved the rest because I was a new mom. My daughter was 6 months.
Yeah.
And I hadn't slept since she was born, which also sucked because of the infection. That's when I had to stop breastfeeding. Because then they put me on all this medication. So it kind of decided my life for me right there in that moment.
That sucks.
But anyway, yeah, you don't sleep at hospitals. Don't go there to sleep. If you think you're going to get a break, there's all those jokes of falling down the stairs just so you could sleep.
Don't.
It doesn't work. You don't sleep at hospitals.
No.
Unless they put you into a coma.
I was going to say, unless you get the good drugs.
Anyway, it was clear almost right away that Waverly Hills needed to be completely self-efficient. So they had horses, mules, and farm equipment. The farm provided all the fresh vegetables and fruit to the patients and staff. And everyone had a hearty diet of milk, eggs, and meat, as they had their own dairy. They had their own hennery. And it also had its own water treatment facility.
It's its own little city.
Yep. All staff lived there, and many died there too.
I was about to say got sick. I hope they paid them well while they were alive.
I think a lot were, in a way, almost volunteers too.
Well, I guess then you're not having to worry about paying bills, right? You have a place to live. And
it's true. If you worked for Waverly Hills, you had to give up your old life. You had to leave everything behind. Eventually, Waverly Hills would become its own town. It had its own zip code. It had its own post office. You were essentially cut off from everything else. There were scheduled visiting days for family. And if you were well enough, you were allowed to go back home to family for 1 day every 6 weeks.
Okay.
And some would take the opportunity to never go back.
So it was like a leper island in a way. Yeah, for TB. Yeah.
By 1921, other treatments were being explored. Although still no, the X-ray was installed at the hospital. In addition to fresh air, sun exposure was being used either by the sun itself or through sun lamps.
Okay.
For more advanced cases, they also started to perform artificial pneumothorax procedures. And that's when air is injected by a needle into the pleural cavity.
Ouch.
To collapse the lung to give it time to heal. And a heftier version of that same procedure was to insert a balloon into the lung, fill that with air, and expand the lung, which just seems
That doesn't
stupid.
seem to make sense to me, but they didn't know much.
It's either, well, let's try deflating it completely
or
expanding it completely.
One of them might work.
One of them might.
Or you might die. And
many did. Many did. By 1922, the waiting list for this hospital had climbed to over 2,600 people. And even more than that in reality, because technically this was only for people who lived in Kentucky.
Okay.
But people really tried from other states, and some were able to get in.
If you had enough money, you can get anywhere.
Yeah. Or you could plead your case to a doctor. If you were interesting enough to them and they wanted to experiment on you, they might let you in.
Right. You were a pretty girl that they wanted to look at.
It wasn't until May of 1924 that construction of the sanatorium as we know it, if you have seen pictures, started. This new main sanatorium building was built to house 400 beds in addition to all of the living quarters for staff. It was going to be 5 floors. On the 5th floor, there was a heliotherapy ward, which was sun therapy for the patients, and a solarium. And sun at the time was thought to help the people who had the disease in their bones.
Oh, okay.
There was an occupational therapy department, a laboratory, an x-ray room, kitchens, a bakery, a laundry department, a recreation room for plays and movies, a chapel, a library, a massage room, a beauty shop, and a barber shop. Communal sun porches ran the lengths of the building. Every bed was equipped with a phone and a radio.
Okay.
Construction finished in September of 1926, and an opening ceremony was in October. The building itself was a significant architectural achievement of its time. The sanatorium was designed by architect William B. Ittner, who was known for his work on several hospitals and sanatoriums across the United States. The architecture is a blend of Beaux Arts, Tudor Revival, and Art Deco styles constructed on a hillside with a long sloping roof that followed the natural contours of the land. The exterior was constructed of limestone. And by the way, I looked into limestone a bit more after our talk on the Sally House.
Yes.
I want to talk about that in a bit when we come to the hauntings, because I have some more to say.
Cool.
The layout was organized around a central core with its wings extending out from the center. This design allowed for maximum natural light and ventilation, with each patient room having access to an exterior window or the balcony.
Okay.
The interior spaces were spacious and airy, with high ceilings and large windows that offered views of the surrounding countryside.
And Kentucky's pretty, so.
It is. This brand new $1 million building wasn't made for the Black community, though. There were no segregated wings. Instead, the old buildings were used for Black patients, and there were far less medical staff there.
So fucked up.
It is. At times, there was only one nurse and one doctor for
everyone?
all of them.
Wow.
And both of them were Black. They tried to get more Black medical staff, but there clearly wasn't training opportunities for them, as there was for white people. And heaven forbid white staff go help the Black community.
Of course not.
I'm not saying that they wouldn't. I think a lot of people would have offered to, but policies were in place there probably that forbade it.
Yes.
But there was plenty of staff for the white hospital.
Of course.
With the new hospital and other advances, other procedures were being done now. Those believed to have tuberculosis in the brain, electroshock therapy was used.
Ugh, that's not going to do anything.
I know. One of the surgical procedures was a phrenectomy, not to be confused with a phrenectomy. They sound exactly the same. So one starts with a PH and one starts with an F.
Okay.
A phrenectomy starting with an F is an oral surgery that treats lip tie or tongue tie.
Okay.
Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Okay. In case you don't, that's when your frenulum, like the little
Connecting
connecting piece
Yeah.
under your tongue or, on either lip is too short and too thick. And so they need to cut it so they have more
flexibility.
mobility. But a phrenectomy starting with a PH is a procedure that crushes the phrenic nerve connected to the diaphragm.
And what's the purpose of that?
By disabling the part of the diaphragm on the side of the diseased lung, physicians aim to temporarily collapse the lung to prevent bacteria from multiplying and to give the lung a chance to heal, which is similar to the other procedure.
What they were doing, yeah. But the poor person with a collapsed lung can't breathe.
I know. I'm assuming this is only done in cases where the other lung is okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
They were also performing thoracoplasty, which involved removal of several ribs to permanently collapse the diseased lung.
Ugh.
There were risks with all of these procedures, of course, in dying, but it was thought to control the spread of tuberculosis by creating less sputum.
Okay.
For the most advanced cases, some patients underwent lobectomies or pneumonectomies, which is removing diseased parts of a lung or an entire lung.
That's so crazy.
People died a lot.
Yes, because surgery back then is already scary, and then you remove very vital organ. Come on.
And they also dabbled in what was used for a really long time, bloodletting.
Yeah.
Now keep in mind, there really wasn't anything for pain management other than
opium. Yeah, I remember that. I don't think you mentioned it earlier, but one of the movies I thought of was Tombstone.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And Doc Holliday, who's played by Val Kilmer in that movie, was always kind of drugged up or whatever. I remember him using a lot of opium to try and just deal with the pain.
Yeah.
And he's based on a real life character that actually is buried in Glenwood Springs, Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
I went to his grave.
He
moved here. Yeah, he moved here to go to the Glenwood Springs because that was a big place for tuberculosis patients back in the day.
And that's why Colorado is so much on the map because of this time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Before it was just for gold miners and, Wild West people. And as soon as it was said you needed to be in higher elevation and fresh air, that's why Colorado became a famous place to come stay.
The place.
The place.
For resorts, but they were really for TB patients that had a lot of money.
Exactly. Money was important. But here, in ways, it seemed like they were doing a lot of good things, but they were also doing a lot of painful experimentation.
Yeah, they were just like, well, these people are going to die anyways. Let's try it, is how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what they did at sanatoriums too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So this wasn't that much kinder than what they were doing to the mentally ill at the time.
Yep, that's true. By the 1930s, housing for the children and Black patients were overcrowded, and a petition was made to construct 2 new buildings. One building was constructed to house an additional 75 Black patients, but there was not an additional child's home yet. For the Black community there, improvements for them were thanks to many different people and associations standing up for them.
Good.
And their right to proper care. And other charitable associations banded together to treat them to things.
Yes.
They would bring them gifts and sweets on holidays. Other times they would bring them clothes and flowers just to bring cheer to their lives.
Right.
They weren't forgotten. But conditions for the Black patients were deplorable compared to the white patients. Cleanliness was not kept up and the buildings were not taken care of in the same way.
Well, yeah, because they didn't even allow a proper amount of staff to be there.
Right. But fast forward to 1940, and tuberculosis went from being the leading cause of death to the 7th leading cause of death in Louisville.
Wow.
And with the introduction of streptomycin in 1943, the decline continued. Streptomycin, if you don't know, is an antibiotic used to treat a variety of bacterial infections now, including tuberculosis. After that, the hospital stopped taking in so many children. They were no longer being removed from
their homes.
Mm-hmm. By 1947, only one child patient was at Waverly Hills.
Okay.
But physicians using streptomycin in combination with other medications, it took time to fully flesh out, about a decade.
Okay.
But it was working. And by the end of the 1950s, around 40% of patients had left the hospital. And by 1960, there was a recommendation from the governor at the time to close Waverly Hills.
They just didn't need it anymore.
Yep. There was so much opposition to this, though, from many employees and past patients who survived and believed in Waverly Hills.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, it was tax funded. With the decline in cases, its need wasn't prominent. And it closed its doors in June of 1961. Any remaining patients there were transferred to Hazelwood, which was actually being expanded at the time.
Okay.
When it closed, after 51 years of service, there were 22 buildings over 544 acres.
That's a lot.
A lot of people just think of just the main sanatorium building, but there's a lot on this property.
Well, yeah, they had to have so many people to support.
Yep.
It's a whole town.
I mean, think about it. Just the people who were handling the animals, who were cooking the food, who were cleaning the linens. Just there were so many people that worked there. And then it just stopped.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of energy, a lot of years, a lot of people, a lot of death, a lot of pain.
In one spot.
It's no wonder why this place is haunted.
And it was limestone.
And it was limestone, which we're going to come back to. Just a year after it closed, the building was reopened in 1962 as Woodhaven Geriatric Center, which was a nursing home for aging patients with various stages of dementia and mobility limits, and those who were severely mentally handicapped. But like with a lot of these places, it was severely understaffed, overcrowded, patient neglect,
I hate
abuse,
to hear that.
Everything you can think of. It lasted about 20 years and it was closed in 1982.
Okay.
In 1983, a man named J. Clifford Todd bought the hospital for around $3 million. Along with the architect Milton Thompson, he wanted to convert it to a minimum security prison for the state, but it never came to fruition because nobody wanted a prison there.
Yeah.
Then there were talks about making it apartments, and that didn't happen either.
That would be a really creepy place to have an apartment.
I know. And you're really far away from everything. Maybe if it was like a religious commune or something, I don't know.
It'd be full on like that apartment building from Ghostbusters.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
She lived in.
Yeah. In March 1996, Robert Alberhasky, who ran Christ the Redeemer Foundation Incorporated, bought Waverly Hills and the surrounding area with plans to construct the world's tallest statue of Jesus.
I was about to say a church. Okay.
On the
That's
site.
even better. He was wanting to compete with Rio.
Yes, he wanted to make something like the Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah.
But he also wanted to convert the building to essentially like this shopping center with like an art center and a worship center. So kind of like what I was saying, a commune of some kind.
A cult is what he wanted.
Yes, he wanted a very, very big cult. But this statue was supposed to be 150 feet tall and 150 feet wide. And it was supposed to be situated on top of the sanatorium.
Mm-hmm.
The first phase of the development was coming in at a cost of $4 million.
And he didn't have that money.
But along with everything else he wanted to do, which also included a theater and the gift shop and everything else,
right,
that required $12 million. And it all fell through.
Because he was broke.
Well, it depended on donations, and people had better stuff to spend their money on.
Yeah.
In all, he only raised
$300.
He raised $3,000 overall.
Oh, I was close.
You were pretty close. Pretty big fail there.
Most people who want to donate are going to help sick children, not building a concrete Jesus.
Yes.
Come on.
And who knows if Kentucky wanted said cult on the hill. I don't know. The project was canceled in December of 1997. And from what I read in some sources, when he couldn't get what he wanted, he tried to have the building condemned so he could tear down everything on the land. So he intentionally let vandalism happen. And it's because of his short ownership of the building that a lot of it went to shit.
Wow, he sounds like a hypocritical Christian.
Yeah, all because of one big statue.
Yeah.
Anyway. Lastly, in 2001, Waverly Hills was sold to Tina and Charlie Mattingly. Charlie's father was an orderly of the hospital in its day.
Okay.
They didn't want to see the historical building completely fall apart.
That's good.
When they found out about some people doing witchcrafty ritual stuff on the property, some not good, and its growing popularity with ghost hunters to earn money to help keep up the place, restore it, the Mattingleys started to host a haunted house every year and then started to give tours on the property.
Okay.
Restorations are happening, but the Mattingleys, since they bought it, have been in a legal battle with the Waverly Hills Historical Society for quite some time.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a conclusion to this yet. I didn't go too much into it, but I essentially found that it's over what their future plans were for the building.
Okay.
The society wants to preserve everything as is, and the Mattingleys had a few different plans for it. They still wanted to preserve it, most of it, but they just needed little additions that they wanted to make.
Like probably better plumbing or better electrical or something.
Some of that stuff. And at one point, they were even kicked off the property. Like they weren't even allowed to live where they purchased
that's
land.
The historical societies can be really brutal, I've heard. Like when you buy a historical house or whatever, like the hoops you have to jump through.
Right.
It's not like they were trying to build a shopping mall with a 150-foot Jesus.
Exactly. They were trying to replace the windows, which needed to be replaced.
So that people can't get in there and vandalize it.
I even came upon their daughter's GoFundMe page talking about her parents. Because of this society coming after them, they didn't have the money to fight them for 20 some years in this legal battle. So
that's fucked.
It's been trouble. But from what I understand, they're now actually trying to work together. It took over 20 years, but now they're actually coming to some kind of agreement.
Now that the building has completely dilapidated.
Right.
Right? Like,
I know.
Couldn't y'all have figured this out before? Because it's a huge property.
It's a huge property. And there needs to be some way to bring in money.
Yes. To restore it.
How else are you going to be able to do anything with it?
How's the Historic Society going to fund it? They don't have the money.
No. So there's that. Like I said, I don't know if it's completely resolved now. I think the last thing I saw was from last year. But throughout all of this, they've continued those tours.
Okay.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end.
Okay.
If you want to visit.
Yes, I might one day. Maybe not after you tell me everything.
So as we discussed, the architecture of the sanatorium with its collegiate Gothic style, imposing facades, soaring towers, and intricate stone carvings, that's never going to go away.
Okay.
They're never going to get rid of any of that.
Well, yeah, that's the iconic part of it.
Including some really awesome gargoyles.
We'll keep those. They're keeping it safe. They're scaring away the demons, right?
Exactly. It's the grandeur of the building's exterior that creates a sense of awe and foreboding and keeps people wanting to visit and possibly run into its longtime inhabitants. There are numerous stories and legends about the supernatural occurrences at the site, and we're going to go over some of those.
Yes.
Common experiences include hearing children's voices or laughter, lights turning on and off, hearing someone having a coughing fit, which I just had, so now my voice is scratchy. Seeing faces appear in windows to rooms, videos, or photos where they shouldn't be, and slamming doors throughout the hospital. Many people have reported hearing voices, whispers, and even full conversations in empty rooms. These voices are often indistinct, but can be quite unsettling.
Yeah.
Some even report physical interactions with the spirits, including being touched or pushed.
I don't want to be touched. Like,
I know.
Just talk to me. Don't be getting physical.
Pretty much any spooky, unexplained thing you can think of
is happening.
happens at this place.
I mean, how many people died? Like, it makes sense. There's
Right.
so much energy there.
Right? We're going to start with shadow people.
Hmm.
One of the most common reports from visitors and staff is the sighting of shadowy figures moving throughout the building. These figures are often seen out of the corner of one's eye and are said to disappear when directly observed. Some paranormal researchers believe they are simply another manifestation of the human spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Others think that they are something far more ominous, as some experience a sense of dread or foreboding when seeing these shadow people. There are different kinds of spirits. These shadow people can be human spirits, just people who once lived among us.
Mm-hmm.
They could be evil humans who became evil spirits, or they could be inhuman spirits, entities that never walked this earth in human form, demons or whatever else you might call them. This was a tuberculosis hospital, and a lot of people died. It was a concentration of people suffering.
Yeah.
Not just the patients, even the staff. The staff witnessed it all and became sick themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of terror, anxiety, depression, and sadness this place had within its walls is truly
Off the charts.
off the charts.
And that attracts those darker energies. And you mentioned earlier that people were sneaking onto the property to do rituals. So
Inviting others.
inviting demons in.
Right. But what that means is what you are experiencing at Waverly Hills, if you go, isn't just from its once upon a time residents, whether that's the patients, the nurses, the cooks, anybody that was there, but other spirits, darker spirits that were drawn to the energy and suffering of this place.
Yeah, that's scary.
Some believe some of the human spirits there are manipulated by inhuman entities as a source of energy.
Mm.
Similar to some of the discussions we had with the Sally House and how spirits of the town might move from place to place, or the possibility that a dark entity there is controlling the other spirits.
Yeah.
In most cases, we think a human spirit is tied to the place it died,
Right.
like the exact location. But if that is not the case, then there are so many other possibilities to consider.
Mm-hmm.
If you follow any of the other theories when it comes to demons, Waverly Hills would be a gold mine to come and drag souls
A demon playground.
to the underworld
Yeah.
or whatever.
There's so many to be had.
Exactly. It's not something to overlook. Tuberculosis took so many people too soon.
Mm-hmm.
It was an odd disease in that it would either take its time,
Right.
hiding dormant for years, or it would take you quickly,
Mm-hmm.
which is the scariest thing about tuberculosis to me. Which are you going to have?
You don't know.
Or do you get sick at all? I don't know. That's what's scary. And it's not hard to imagine that emotions were conflicting for someone
Those
living
who
with
were
the
there.
disease.
Yeah.
At its peak, with a death every hour, your morale was probably pretty low.
Yeah, you're around it all day long wondering if you're next.
Right. Before antibiotics, it was a yo-yo of emotions. And this is evident in some of the letters from patients written to families or others during their stay there. They would talk about their improvements and be hopeful, but then a few weeks later, it would take several steps back for them.
Yeah, they'd get depressed.
Then again, some improvement, and then they just died. So it's even though some did recover and move on with their lives, the ones that were left, it's like, why not me?
You would have a lot of conflicting emotions
Yep.
if you're there watching. I guess they didn't really see the children dying, but
Right.
like,
They were separated in a way, but let's just say you were next to someone and they got taken away.
right. And they had,
And you know they died and you were just talking to them yesterday.
right. And
It
they were
weighs on
25
you.
years old or whatever
Right.
and had so much promise.
Right. That leaves a lot of confused, lost, wandering souls,
Mm-hmm.
which in turn could attract these evil spirits. There was just this heavy, heavy preoccupation with death there at all times. That's a lot of energy.
A lot of negative.
Yep. From the skeptic's point of view, of course, because we got to throw that in there.
We love to be skeptics too.
Maybe the shadow people that people see when visiting Waverly Hills are just their eyes and their minds playing tricks on them. We have all experienced this.
Yes.
If we look into the darkness for a few seconds too long, we can see something.
Mm-hmm.
We see movement, we see eyes, we just feel a presence. We can create these experiences ourselves. I
Yeah.
do it all the time.
Yeah, me too.
Or you could argue that by focusing, we're just becoming aware of what is already there.
Truth.
If you believe we share the same space of spirits, just different layers, different dimensions, right?
I like that way of thinking of it too.
Because I feel like I go through that every night. You know, I turn off all the lights. I'm not quite asleep and I stare into the darkness
Oh, yeah.
and I see stuff. But if what I'm saying is how it actually is, then people are actually there. Spirits are actually there staring back at me.
You're tuning into it.
Scary. Anyway, shadow people, probably more than anything else in noises, stand out at the Waverly.
Okay.
They roam the halls, both inside the main building and on the surrounding grounds. A common shadow person is that of a very tall man who is seen moving through the halls and rooms. Some describe it as a malevolent being, but it's definitely a shock and reminds me of scary movies. But more specifically, it reminds me of sleep paralysis because it's a very common thing for people who have sleep paralysis to see a man in a top hat.
Okay.
Which I think he's literally called the Hat Man.
The Hat Man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I've seen him probably at least 2 or 3 times. I know
With
more than
sleep
once.
Paralysis?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's a Hat Man wandering around Waverly Hills?
Maybe he's real.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe there's an entire race of Hat Man people who come to your dreams.
It's a spirit that we don't know about. When you reach that realm, you just get a hat.
Yeah.
Instead of angel wings, you get a top hat.
And I do not take Benadryl. I only say that because science is funny sometimes. They try to explain things they shouldn't try explaining.
So they're going to say Benadryl makes you see hat people?
Yes, there is literally a science connection between people taking Benadryl and seeing the Hat Man.
I've taken Benadryl and I've never seen a Hat Man.
It's just
I'm really
silly.
disappointed now.
I know. It just seems weird to be like, here's this drug. When you go to sleep, you won't be able to move and you'll see a man in a hat. Don't be alarmed.
To me, when I take Benadryl, I'm like almost in a coma.
I don't take Benadryl. That's why
I
I'm
take
confused.
it when I'm like down and my nose won't stop running and I want to sleep. That's the only reason I take it, because it literally puts me into a coma. But yeah, I don't take it much.
The Hat Man is not connected to Benadryl. I just have to say that because you could literally go online and Google it right now and it'll be like, the Hat Man shows up when people take Benadryl.
The Hat Man. He also looks like the guy that's in like X-Files. And
a lot of movies you just think of.
Oh, there's a movie called The Hat Man.
Maybe it's just a race of ghosts and Waverly has its own.
Here's a costume idea for the Hat Man.
Maybe I will be the Hat Man next time. What did we say we were going to be? We decided this. Oh, yeah. We were going to be Candy.
Oh, Candy and Betty. Who's doing the curly hair? Me? Because you've got the long brown hair.
Oh, I have to be the murdered.
But I have to do a perm and carry an axe.
Funny. Anyway, moving on. Just a few fun notes. There have been reports of the sound of an organ playing in the chapel, even though
no one's there.
There's no organ. It's been out of service for many years. The elevator apparently has a mind of its own.
That's scary. I already am creeped out by elevators, so
yeah,
I will not get on that.
There have been reports of the elevator starting by itself, stopping at different floors, and opening to reveal empty corridors, or in some cases, some of those ghostly figures. Watch them just get on and they're like, excuse me, can you take me up to the 5th floor?
And then when you don't push the right button, they just do it anyways. That's why it stops at different floors, because the spirits were like, excuse me, I need off here.
Some have to keep doing shit, you know?
Yeah.
On the 3rd floor, and I don't have much more on this, so I am just mentioning, there is apparently a little girl that's seen very often, and she has no eyes.
Why would she have no eyes? That's not part of tuberculosis.
I don't know. A lot of spirits don't have eyes, though.
Yeah.
It's a spirity thing to do.
She didn't want her eyes anymore.
But she is a common apparition that people see.
I mean, that's disturbing, for sure.
It's very disturbing, which takes me back to my sleep paralysis stuff again, because I've seen a girl with no eyes, or like faceless in a way, more demonic looking when I've had sleep paralysis.
So I'm going to take this back to the show, The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, and maybe Waverly Hills is calling you to come back.
Me?
Yes.
Specifically?
Mm-hmm. Oh. If you've seen both of these things, you need to go.
I don't want to go to Waverly. I mean, no. I do want to go to Waverly, actually. It'd be really cool to do the history portion of it. I don't necessarily need to experience
the paranormal
part. No. I understand going to some of these places. I do want to. Maybe my excitement to go is if you and I actually did one of them, because we just talk about them and everything's on our list. But if we actually went and did one, maybe I would change my tune.
Yeah. I mean, I've been to Lizzie Borden House. It's the only one I've been to so far.
I do like going through abandoned houses. Not that I know the history of, just like walking through them. Those are fun.
Yeah.
But it is quite the structure. So I wouldn't mind going. I just don't know if I would stay the night.
Yeah.
One of the sadder spirits is that of an older woman. Some see her at the entrance of the hospital before they even go inside. She has been seen running out of the front door of the entrance.
Like trying to get the hell out?
Or like more scurrying along because she is shackled. Her wrists and ankles are in chains and there's blood coming from those areas.
Whoa.
And she's crying for help as she's running out
So
before she disappears.
She may not have been a tuberculosis. She may have been from the geriatric years.
That's true. We can't forget that this was other things. And I've even read somewhere that the land itself was haunted before anything was ever built on it, as a lot of places are.
Probably Native American burial grounds or something.
But that, that scares me. She could have been part of the geriatric.
Whatever it was called. And there were people there that were mentally handicapped, and I could see
dementia.
And back then they would have shackled people.
Oh, that's sad. Yeah.
Poor lady.
I know. When you visit this place, you can only go through a specific entrance, though. It's on their website.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if this is the same entrance, but if it is, it definitely sets the tone.
Yeah.
You're not even inside the building yet.
And somebody's running out, or a spirit is running out at you.
It does make me wonder about her, especially now about that. And if that is an energy left behind or what happened to her. But she hasn't only been seen at the entrance. Some have witnessed who they assume to be the same elderly woman roaming the hospital, moaning and bleeding from her chained hands and feet.
Oh.
She walks around lost and will cry for help. But if anyone tries to approach her, she'll run away screaming in terror.
Wow.
Which does seem
Sounds
more
like
mental.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. This particular spirit and others one might experience going here, if not most of what is experienced here, brought me to thinking about the stone tape theory.
Okay, what's that?
We've talked about this a lot in many ways.
Okay.
But I didn't know there was a name for it. So I want to explain it. The stone tape theory. It's a paranormal hypothesis that suggests that ghosts and hauntings can be recorded and played back like a tape recorder.
Okay.
The theory suggests that certain types of stone or other materials can act as a recording medium for psychic impressions, which can be played back under certain environmental conditions. The theory was proposed in the 1970s by a British writer and broadcaster named David Fontana, who suggested that the energy of past events can be absorbed and stored in certain materials, such as stone, wood, or metal. According to the stone tape theory, these psychic impressions can be reactivated by changes in the environment, such as temperature, humidity, or electromagnetic fields, causing the observer to experience a haunting. The theory has been used to explain a wide range of paranormal phenomena, including ghost sightings, poltergeist activity, and other supernatural occurrences. Of course, this is the subject of much debate among paranormal researchers, with some arguing that it provides a plausible explanation for the hauntings, while others have criticized the theory for being speculative and lacking in scientific evidence, because that's what we do with ghosts, is prove it with science.
We can't. Right. That's why I'm like, you got to throw that out the window. This is a whole different realm, guys.
If this is true, though, it explains a lot of what guests experience, with only some of the experiences being true interactions with spirits and other entities.
Right.
This building was made of limestone. Like with the Sallie House haunting, we talked about limestone throughout the city and it possibly being this little highway for spirits to move about. I looked into that a little bit more, and it might not be the limestone itself, but the quartz within the limestone.
Yeah, I've heard of quartz doing that too.
And the condition in which limestone is created, because in places where limestone is still present in its natural
state
location, which is in these underground streams or springs that pass through the limestone.
Okay.
So where you find underground streams in limestone, you usually find hauntings.
Very interesting.
I just thought it was interesting. So maybe in areas where there's not an underground spring like directly beneath it or whatever, the limestone acts as a recorder instead. Not to say that there aren't actual spirits or entities, but the question then becomes how to tell the difference.
Yeah.
Either way, it's interesting to think about. If you experience a haunting, is it an actual spirit or entity interacting with you? Or are you just witnessing a playback of some kind?
I guess it all depends on how interactive they are with you. But sometimes it can feel interactive because you happen to be standing in the place where that recording
exactly
happens, right? And it comes right at you.
Which reminds me a lot of our talk about Queen Mary.
With the little girl.
The girl, but remember the man who was walking around the boat again and again and again. Yeah.
Yeah, he seems stuck in a loop.
Yep. Or maybe it's just a playback. Hopefully he's not actually stuck in a loop.
I hope not.
Yeah.
He's just an impression that was left behind.
Anyway, moving on. There are some that have reported seeing a man with a white coat and pants in the kitchen and cafeteria, possibly a baker or a cook that used to work there, because sometimes the smell of food will waft through the areas from the kitchen. One experience known comes from the Louisville Ghost Hunter Society. When they visited, the kitchen was in shambles. Windows, tables, and chairs were broken. Again, from the time of just vandalism.
Right.
Why people go into these places and just destroy, I don't understand. The cafeteria was in a similar state of disrepair. Other than that, there wasn't really anything happening, so they decided to leave. But before they did, they heard footsteps, and then they heard a door swing shut, and they noticed the smell of freshly baked bread.
Well, at least it's a good smell.
Right. Kendra's hungry. Kendra's the one hungry right
today.
now.
I'm like, bread.
No one else was in the building, let alone using the ruined kitchen to bake bread. So there just seemed to be no explanation for what they witnessed. But smelling food is another thing that people experience.
Okay.
One of the scarier things I came upon looking up what people have experienced going here is doppelgangers.
Oh, no. I want nothing to do with that.
I believe it said that we have 1 or 2 doppelgangers in the world. Even my mom has claimed to see one of mine.
Right.
But I don't like the idea of ghost, bad spirit, whatever the fuck they are, mimic doppelgangers. I don't like that.
No. Well, you know that Kentucky, this is another episode. The Appalachians are known for the mimics.
I know. I've seen that.
So it could be a similar spirit. I want to do an episode on that, or you should. One of us should, because I keep seeing stuff about it.
That's true. Maybe it is just 2 different words.
Yeah.
It might be. Although I'm going to talk about one experience, and what I've heard of the mimics so far anyway is much more sinister.
Okay.
So I don't know if they're the same. But doppelganger spirits here, also known as double walkers, are a type of spirit. They do mimic people.
Okay.
They mimic their appearance, voice, and mannerisms.
Creepy.
They can take one look at you, or I don't know what they do, flow through you or something, and then just become you.
No.
At Waverly Hills, people have experienced this. I'm already getting creeped out just talking about it. Can you imagine going to this place, looking down this scary ass old dark hall or across a room and seeing yourself?
No.
Guests and tour guides have reported either seeing doppelgangers of themselves or of others that are with them.
Yeah.
One tour guide was on a completely different floor and came down, and part of the group he was helping that night were really upset with him because they said that he came down earlier, took one look at them, and walked away.
Oh my God.
And they were like expecting him to help them with stuff when at the time he was 3 floors up.
Yeah, that's creepy.
Everything about the doppelganger here is identical except for one thing. They do not have eyes.
Ugh.
Their eyes are just black holes.
Let's make it scarier.
I know.
So you're seeing yourself with no eyeballs.
Right.
Weird.
So do the doppelgangers know to put on glasses?
And a hat.
I mean, if they're wearing clothes, can there not be ghostly versions of extra like things that they can put on to help in their disguise?
Sunglasses are not in the spiritual realm because it's not bright there.
I'm trying to find a good
I'm just making
response to that because I think they deserve accessories.
They can't accessorize. That's why they're always in white. It's always the lady in white, right?
I know that brings me back to that one conversation we had a long time ago when you become a ghost and you have to go to a stylist and they're like, which one do you want to wear for the rest of your life?
And they open it and it's just a closet full of white dresses. As a woman, you're like, fuck.
Give me hot pink.
The little girl in the Stanley wears hot pink.
Yeah, that's right. We did talk about that.
Look for her next week. Look for her this week.
Oh, yeah. Maybe I'll find my earring.
You should go back to the bathroom.
What if? Okay, I had an experience. Okay, so I bought my daughter, what are they called? They're like those little rubbery things that go in Crocs. Gibbets? Okay, whatever. My daughter doesn't have real Crocs. She has versions of them. And then she also has versions of gibbets.
They're knockoff gibbets.
So I got her some knockoff gibbets.
They're quibbits.
I put them in like her Easter basket. They were really cute. They're from Target, you know, that little section they have. But even how cute they were, and they were really good quality, they're not staying on, okay?
No.
She's lost almost all of them already. One of them blew my mind, though.
Why?
Because I took her to King Soopers like a couple weeks ago, and she lost like 2 of them.
Okay.
Then, this was like earlier this week, I go to King Soopers. It's one of the rainy days. And I just need to get a couple things. And when I come out in the ground, I noticed a shape. My brain just was like, wait a second.
That looks familiar.
I pick it up, and it is one of her, what are they called again? Gibbets. And it looks like it's been ran over 100 million times. But I found it again. I was like,
it was waiting.
Holy crap. It's so cute too. It's like a little skate.
But now it's
roller
like
skate.
Half a skate, or it's
well,
got
now it's going to stay with
tracks.
me for the rest of my life because it's found its way back to me.
It needed to be with you. I was like, help.
Which is interesting because I took my daughter roller skating yesterday. So
fun.
Stuff comes back.
Yeah.
Anyway, so on to our next spirit. As we know, there were a lot of children at the sanatorium.
Yeah.
One of the more well-known ghosts there is a little boy known as Timmy.
Okay.
He was around 6 or 7 when he died there, but he didn't die from tuberculosis. He died from falling off of the roof patio.
Uh-oh.
A nurse, Mary Hilgert, knew Timmy really well. She would spend one of her breaks playing with him at the same time every day. His parents were patients at the hospital, and he had no other place to live. So he was one of those children. He didn't have much, but he had a little music box that his parents gave him that he would carry around with him everywhere, and he had a ball.
Okay.
These were his 2 most prized possessions. The nurse would remind Timmy not to wind up the music box too tight or it would break. The unaffected kids, like Timmy, used to all live together away from the sick patients, and this was on the 5th floor.
Okay.
They used to play on the roof of the hospital.
Not smart.
Well, this is where they had a park set up for them, swing sets and all.
Safety guidelines were very different back then.
One day he was playing up there chasing a ball and fell to the ground.
Oh.
I'm sure they had precautions in place, so it must have been him just really not paying attention.
Which is what kids do.
I know.
That's why you don't put them on the roof.
No. Some tried to blame a man who is seen standing where Timmy fell from, who was a convicted criminal, but a patient at the time.
So he just kind of pushed him a little.
But ultimately, it was determined that it was an accident. There was a police investigation, and they didn't blame the guy, which is surprising. He was already a criminal. You could have.
Yeah.
They could have. The nurse was given his little music player. She was very sad about his passing. I'm guessing his parents passed away as well. But one day she was in her room and the little music box was on a shelf and it started playing. She got up to investigate it. It made her really happy that it went off because it reminded her of the boy. So she went to try and wind it up again, but it wouldn't play. So she opened it and saw that all of the mechanics were gone. So he must have broke it at some point.
Oh, yeah.
But then she looked at the time and it was the same time she used to meet up with him every day.
Oh, that's
And
so
she was like,
sweet.
oh, he's just saying hi to me.
Yeah.
But Timmy loved playing with his ball as well. And he died so young that he stuck around and wanders the hospital trying to have fun.
Yeah.
There are apparently a lot of balls throughout the hospital.
Okay.
That Timmy
plays with
and that he might play with you. Visitors bring balls for him.
Okay.
So there's tons everywhere. So you might see one that's already there moving on its own. Of course, some will say it's the wind or the uneven flooring.
That's what they always say.
But he is the most interacted with, or the most videotaped that people try to get is playing with the ball with Timmy.
Because that's something, tangible you can touch.
And there's also a little girl who wants to play too. So she might join in. On to the 5th floor. The 5th floor is said to be one of the most active areas.
Okay.
People hear footsteps when no one else is around. Objects move around without explanation, and doors open and close on their own. This floor is where the mentally disturbed patients were housed at Waverly.
Oh, that's scary.
A lot goes on the 5th floor, and it's a focus for almost all paranormal investigators who go there.
Okay.
On one end of the 5th floor was the women's ward. There have been reports of the sound of a woman crying, particularly in that ward. Some believe this could be the spirit of a patient who died during childbirth.
Ouch.
Or a mother who lost a child to tuberculosis.
Mm-hmm.
But this is also where room 502 is, which is a famous room.
Okay.
This room is said to be particularly active with reports of disembodied voices, strange noises, and feelings of being watched. Some believe it may be the spirit of a former patient who died in the room, but we know of 2 other deaths associated with this particular room.
Okay.
Or as legend says, the head nurse in 1928 died there.
Okay.
She was 29 years old, and she was either pregnant or had tuberculosis or both, and she hung herself in that room.
Sad.
Rumors are that she was pregnant with a doctor's baby and he rejected her, and that's why she committed suicide. Or that she got pregnant and then got tuberculosis, which led her to end her life.
Yeah.
Or she fell into a depression over not wanting the baby.
Any of those.
Or just being fucking sad because she sees death every single day.
And now she's pregnant and she doesn't want to bring a child into that.
And she was having a child out of wedlock, which wasn't allowed back then.
Yes, you were a scarlet woman.
Right. The room is described as having a heavy sadness to it. But the spirit there, if it's her or not, doesn't want you there. And people have experienced the spirit yelling at you to get out.
Okay. If you tell me to get out, I'm leaving. Don't worry.
Seriously. Some people believe this nurse was a girl named Mary Lee.
Okay.
There is a famous photo of a girl taken on September 10th, 2006 by Tom Halstead during an overnight investigation at Waverly Hills. He is part of the Missouri Paranormal Research Group. It was taken on the 4th floor, but people have tried to link the two. With the death toll in the thousands, I'd say it's a bit of a stretch.
Okay.
But she is called Mary Lee because the girl in the photo resembles a girl known to have been staying there. In the photo, it appears to be the apparition of a young woman with dark hair and a white nightgown or a dress.
But that could
like
have been,
they all wear.
I was about to say, that could have been any woman.
Exactly. It could be any woman.
Mm-hmm.
But they do have this picture of Mary Lee, and people say it's her.
Okay.
But to me, again, like, it could be you.
It could be any
me.
woman with
It could be
long
any
hair.
It's just like dark hair, white dress. Cool.
Gotta be Mary Lee.
Right. So the legend is that Mary Lee might be this nurse.
Okay.
The other theory is that she's a daughter of a doctor and that she spent her time visiting patients, trying to cheer them up, and that she ended up getting TB and passed away.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way to prove any of it.
Nope.
But I'm going to include the photo in socials anyway because it's a controversial photo. Of course, some believe it isn't real, and different quote like photo experts or investigators have spoken on it, and it has its divided opinions.
Okay. What's
from
your
these
opinion?
Experts. I don't fucking know.
Okay. I'll
No
look at it and see
opinion.
later.
The people who claim that it's not real, they're like, oh, that part of her back is too curved. I'm like, we're all different. Okay. Her head is too big for her body. Some people have big heads. I don't know. Like, I wouldn't be able to look at a photo unless it's like super freaking obvious to say someone superimposed that into this photo.
She had fucking tuberculosis. Like, her body is wasting away.
Right.
So maybe her head is big.
That's very true. You
Okay.
decide. If it's not Mary Lee, there's thousands upon thousands of others that it could
I've
be.
died there. Yeah.
So I don't know why we're judging the photo. But back to room 502. 4 years later, in 1932, another nurse died in connection with that room.
Okay.
She jumped or was pushed from the room's balcony. Was the sadness of that room the same back then? And she felt like she had to jump?
There's a demon in there telling nurses to kill themselves.
Maybe the other nurse pushed her?
Yeah. Maybe the other nurse was like, come join me.
Or it was an actual person who just pushed her, like another staff member
crazy-
or a patient, because it was the crazy ward area.
That's possible. I'm sure that happens. Or I was thinking the criminal that pushed little Timmy off.
He's
came
getting
back.
away with everything, and now he's a serial killer who just pushes people off
He
of
just pushes
balconies.
people out windows.
Who knows? But some have reported going into this room and feeling supernaturally compelled to jump off of the patio.
Okay.
But to me, I'm like, well, you know what happened. So are you letting that trick your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're already suggesting
But
it.
in some ways, it's so bad that they have to be like talked down.
Okay. Well, that might be different.
And some pregnant women who have visited this room say that they have that depression come over them, or they just are extremely uncomfortable in room 502.
Okay.
Beneath Waverly Hills is a 500-foot long tunnel that the staff used for entering and exiting the building and to help bring up materials.
Okay.
Apart from this, it was also used as a temporary air raid shelter during the war. But this tunnel is particularly eerie.
Well, yeah, it's a tunnel.
Exactly. The tunnel itself is on a really deep incline. So carrying items up was really difficult. So they built this track system with carts to do the work.
Okay.
On one side are stairs that go all the way up or down. And on the other side, it's flat, but that's where the track used to be. So if you were to look at it now.
Mm-hmm.
It was built on the first floor with the rest of the building and is part of why some call the first floor the morgue wing.
Okay.
When the illness and thus the number of deaths was at its peak, the staff used this tunnel to get bodies outside.
That's, not nice.
Well, it's because the sight of the dead being carried away in view of other patients, it was lowering their morale.
Yeah, it would definitely bring you down.
So they came up with the idea to use the tunnel to transport the bodies discreetly outside instead of like through the main hospital and out the door for someone to pick them up. And they thought, keeping dead bodies
not sanitary.
Near an open. Exactly. But this tunnel then earned another name called the body chute.
Okay.
When I first saw this name in my research, I'm like, is that a hole? They just like throw people down this
drop 'em?
hole? But it's not. It's not.
Okay.
At one point, the number of deaths was so high that bodies were stacked up at the end of the tunnel until someone could come and get them. There is a lot of paranormal activity in this area, but I wouldn't say as much as the rest of the place. It's definitely creepy.
Yeah.
But they are dead bodies. They're the bodies, not the people dying there.
Right. So it wouldn't hold the same energy.
I don't think so, unless some
were still alive.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then they're like down there just kind of hanging out.
Among all these rotting bodies.
That would definitely be traumatic enough for you to haunt.
And you can't really breathe to let
anyone know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I think of because there is a lot of EVPs. It's very popular for this location and people have heard people asking for help.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Children like, I'm 8 years old or help me or whatever. There's a lot going on down there. But other than that, it's just a creepy tunnel.
Yeah. And your mind is going to create things in a creepy tunnel sometimes too.
Right. And it goes down in the slope.
Yes. I don't know that I want to go down there. I've
seen it.
Enclosed spaces.
I saw it on videos. It's good enough.
Yeah. I don't like caves I'm claustrophobic. So nope, I'm good. I don't need to be in a tunnel where a bunch of dead bodies used to be. I'm good. Mm-hmm. I did the catacombs though.
Oh, I want to do that. I want to. Although I know it's used for trafficking and stuff. So
I mean, maybe the parts that aren't tourable.
Yeah,
we went on the tour.
Parts that aren't tourable.
But I full on was
tourable.
Tourable. I was definitely at the point of almost having a panic attack being down there.
Really?
Yeah, I don't like it.
I can't say I've really had the experience to tell you one way or another.
Have you been in caves?
Not like that, no.
Yeah.
No.
I've always been afraid of elevators, so that's how I know I had claustrophobia from a young age.
I don't like when someone's in my space.
Yeah, I have that too, even like in large crowds, which I think is a different thing, but it's also the same kind of phobia because it's just not being able to leave when you want to, like
that's
feeling
what it
trapped.
Is. Yeah.
And that's my like biggest thing. And so, yeah, you might have a little bit of it.
I might. Like if someone's too close to me and I didn't invite them into that close of contact with me, it sends my body into a different space and time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even being on planes can bother me, not because of flying. I'm not afraid of being up in the air. It's being stuck on that little plane and not being able to leave.
Yeah, I have to push that out of my brain. I don't think about that at all.
Yeah.
I forget that I'm in the air.
You're in a metal tube for hours.
It's fucking crazy.
Yeah. I'm going to be in a metal tube for hours in 3 days.
I'll be in one too, but I'm on the ground.
Cars are different because you can stop and get out. Planes,
true.
You're there until the pilot takes you down.
It's very true. Okay.
So we digress.
Also on the first floor was the electroshock therapy room. But electroshock therapy was also performed in other rooms throughout the building. And I want to tell a story of an incident on the fourth floor in the operating room.
Okay.
Electroshock therapy wasn't going to help anyone.
It's never
with
ever going to
tuberculosis. But back then it was the answer for a lot of ailments. Kind of like heartburn medication today.
Oh, God.
It's kind of just like handed out like candy to anybody who comes to you with anything.
They're like, I have chest pain. Oh, it's just heartburn. I'm like, can you kind of check and make sure
stomach
my
hurts.
heart's okay?
Oh, it's just heartburn. I have an ache in my thigh. Here's some heartburn medication.
Drew went in because he's had like a sore throat for a while and they're like, oh, it's heartburn. And he's like, well, can you just check? Maybe there's something going on.
Nope, here's some heartburn medication, because now it's written in their like little hospital law that you have to give someone heartburn medication. They have to be on it for 6 months before they'll look into anything else, which is stupid because it ruins your kidneys. So if you go to a doctor and they say, here's some heartburn medication.
I never took it. They gave that.
Say no.
When I had anxiety, that was the first thing. They're like, oh, it's just heartburn. I'm like, I don't think so. It's like fluttering in my chest.
It was really hard because I was on it for a long time because that's what they did. And I was just a naive little kid. And I had been on it for so long that it was actually my foot doctor, because I had a skiing accident. I don't know if I've told this story before, but I had a skiing accident and I smashed my big toe.
Okay.
Really bad. Like my toenail went black, came off, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
And I had to go to a foot doctor and he asked me what medication I was on or whatever. And he said, get off of that.
Was it Zantac?
I can't remember exactly the name.
Because that's the one with all the lawsuits now.
I can't remember exactly the name, but he's the one that told me that, no, that fucks up your kidneys. Get off of it.
You know what's really interesting is my dad was on Zantac for years and years, and he's had so many problems, like with UTIs and such. It makes me wonder.
It's true. And I was having some other stomach issues, and I went to my doctor, and everything always changes. And she's like, here's some heartburn medication. I'm like, bitch, I was on that for years.
That's not the fucking
I'm not
problem.
doing it. And she wasn't listening to me. And I had to advocate for myself again and again and again. And she was such a bitch to me.
Doctors can be.
And then I went to someone else. I did some kind of other test that didn't require her approval. I don't remember what it was, but I had to go back to her, and she completely changed her tune. Oh, this, and like she looked at me as a human being, and I'm like, fuck you. And then she said this one thing, well, I have to give that first before I can do anything else. I'm like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And it was literally 2 days later that I had to have emergency surgery for my gallbladder to be removed.
Our healthcare system's fucked. It's either they give you heartburn medication or allergy meds. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
It's just allergies. Get some Zyrtec. That's the other thing that they give. Zyrtec and Prilosec.
So screw healthcare. But in the case of electroshock therapy, it just hurt and terrified the patients.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I never want to experience it.
Electrocuted.
Yes.
In your brain.
One particular patient's experience may be the reason for an entity, demon, shadow creature, or other form of energy that is seen throughout the hospital.
Uh-oh.
It's what is known as the creeper.
Okay.
Its origin is a really hot topic of discussion if you get really into wanting to discuss the things here. But I want to tell this story because it's interesting, yet it's a terrifying possible explanation for this entity's existence.
Okay.
Which has been experienced by more than a few visitors who went to Waverly Hills. The issue is I wasn't able to verify the story myself. So I found it through one source, and I'm going to tell it anyway because it was so compelling. And I feel like it's the only story that I've come across so far that makes you question just how powerful emotions and energy is.
Okay.
On August 23rd, 1967, an employee of Waverly Hills, Harold Wood, along with other nurses and a doctor, were in the fourth floor operating room to perform electroshock therapy on a young boy named Richard.
Okay.
Harold described the boy as being very polite and quiet, but having a strong presence about him. He said you could see that the boy was terrified.
Yeah.
That his eyes said it all because this was going to be his second ECT.
So he knew what was coming.
He already had experienced it once before, and he was now frightened of the experience, and his emotions were already peaked.
Yeah.
Harold was surprised because the doctors were discussing upping the voltage to a level that's not safe for a child. And they did. And the boy was screaming and convulsing. At one point, he spit out his mouth guard. And when he did this, the doctor slapped the boy across the face.
Shit.
The nurses and others in the room were so disturbed by what was being done to the little boy that some became physically ill or started to cry.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in the room could feel that the atmosphere changed, but the violent treatment continued. And at some point, Richard soiled himself.
Okay.
Harold allegedly recalled seeing the boy's eyes turn from fear to rage, staring at the doctor.
Yeah.
Staring him down for what he was doing to him. And out of nowhere, the radiator in the room started to act up. It started clanging really loudly, and crows started flying into the window as if they were trying to get through the glass.
Okay.
Instead, they'd break their necks and were seriously injuring themselves and piling up on the window ledge.
Okay.
Then a black haze started in the corner of the ceiling in the room.
Mm-hmm.
He described it as starting to drip down from the corner to the ground, and from that haze, a creature started to form.
Oh.
When this black cloud creature was forming, everyone started to smell what they could only describe as burnt flesh and rotten eggs.
It's always sulfur.
Within a few seconds, the creature grew to 9 feet tall. It was just a head and shoulders and part of a torso, and its bottom half was this swirling black mist. And as it moved closer, trailing behind it, it looked like dripping black spider webs.
Okay.
It quickly moved over and on top of the young boy, covering him completely.
Okay.
The shadow creature started emanating a terrifying noise, this deep, broken, grumbling voice that threatened the staff, saying, get out, go from the child, leave him now.
Wow. So he like conjured up a protector.
Harold believes that the shadow creature was born from Richard's fear, from his pain and suffering and rage, and that this entity manifested to protect Richard.
Yeah.
After this shadow entity or creature stuck around and has been seen by visitors of the sanatorium.
I do not want to see this.
It's rare to see it, but when it is seen, it has this aura of doom.
Yeah.
An immediate feeling of dread will come over you. It crawls along the floor, the walls, and ceiling on all fours. You can't really see its bottom legs, but that's how it's described, crawling around. And it will crawl around quickly upside down.
Nope. I'm like getting chills thinking about this thing. It's like a horror movie.
Exactly. You see that in any horror movie. It's terrifying. This is one of the most frightening encounters you can experience at Waverly Hills. Many believe it to be demonic, but if it was born out of the emotions from this tortured boy, it makes sense for it to stay around and feed off the energy of the restless, broken souls that are stuck there. And maybe it wasn't born from the boy, but due to the boy's like heightened emotions, somehow the boy's rage
conjured it.
Exactly. Like opened up a portal and allowed it to come from another dimension, which reminds me of Stranger Things and how Elle's rage and her emotions created that connection to the upside down. Like that's what I think of.
Absolutely. I was totally picturing Stranger Things and 11 specifically. Yeah. That would be my luck if I went to Waverly Hills. This is what I would see.
Yeah.
My first paranormal experience would be this.
If you want to visit this place, just keep that in mind. Out of all the spirits and playbacks you might come across, none of them are dangerous, but people have had experiences running into this entity. And it's not just on the 4th floor. It's everywhere throughout the building. He could be anywhere at any time.
Everywhere. Okay. Nope.
So be warned. There are countless personal stories people have had when visiting Waverly Hills. It is so haunted that it is rare to go there and not have an experience. Very rarely does someone go and not at least have a sickening feeling and wanting to leave. As I mentioned in the beginning, it's unclear exactly how many people died there. And we may never know. There isn't a book somewhere perfectly listing all the deaths. There are historical societies trying their best to piece it all together, and it's an ongoing project. You can see some of this on the Kentucky Historic Institution's website.
Okay.
But one of the reasons I think we might never have the exact numbers is when thinking about the Black community there at the hospital. With the way that they were treated and how things were handled for a really long time there, I can see things not properly being recorded.
No, absolutely not.
Otherwise, there wasn't a care to record anything. Paper isn't resilient.
Right.
We can't really come back to that. It was a very humid area as well.
Yeah.
There weren't computers back then. And the amount of deaths may have been hidden in some cases because Waverly was supposed to be the answer for this massive area. It would not have been good to report on too many deaths coming from there.
True. And how do you get new patients if everybody's dying?
Exactly. And residents of Jefferson County, Kentucky, were paying for this massive property with their tax dollars.
Yeah.
Some do truly believe the death toll from Waverly to be closer to that 63,000.
That's insane.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
But the reason we have such lower numbers as well is some simply go off of data that they can find and verify.
Okay.
Which creates the much lower number.
Okay.
Really, it's a guess at this point.
It's probably somewhere in between. It's probably like 50,000 or something.
Yeah. In recent years, Waverly Hills Sanatorium has been the subject of several documentaries, TV shows, tons of YouTube shit, I can't include any
always.
EVP stuff here. It's other people's stuff, but there's tons out there. You can go look at it, go listen to it. It is a tourist attraction today. Today, visitors can take guided tours of the facility and learn about its history, as well as participate in ghost hunts and other paranormal activities. You can stay the night.
No thanks.
You can look at all of the options available today at the main website, which is the Waverly Hills Sanatorium.com. Even children with an interest in the paranormal, with parents' permission and if accompanied by them, can do a junior overnight ghost hunt.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool.
That's
Maybe
cool
they don't let them do the whole facility.
They're not
though.
taking them, but the creeper could be anywhere.
Exactly. So it's like if they can do it, I can do it. I also just don't want to sleep on floors unless I
don't
have
want to sleep in some place where I knew 50,000 plus people probably died.
That's true.
Like,
I really don't.
Kind of creeps me out. Even if I have no experiences, just the thought of that, I'm like, I'm good.
I don't know. I feel like we should challenge ourselves some days. We're really yo-yoing with this bullshit lately.
We need to go see something paranormal.
You know what it is? It's because we just don't have the time.
No.
So it's hard justifying doing something that we're not going to be comfortable with.
Yeah. I mean, I camp. I'm doing fucking Machu Picchu where I'm going to be like out in the cold for 3
way different.
nights.
That's like self-expansion.
Yes,
so,
true.
Anyway, it's surprisingly not that expensive to go to this hospital unless you do a private overnight and pay for the building to yourself.
No, that would be even scarier.
But even then, it's not that bad. Go look at it. If you want to do that, gather some people and go stay the night at this place. It's like $1,000 and you get the whole building to yourself.
The whole building?
Yeah, it's not that bad. So anyway, that's it for this episode. Despite its dark past, Waverly Hills Sanatorium remains an important part of Kentucky's history, of American history, and is a fascinating destination for those interested in the supernatural. And I say go support the Mattingleys in restoring this property and keeping it going, because we don't want to see it getting teared down. And they've already dealt with so much shit trying to just do what they're doing there. Yes. And I think they have good intentions. So yeah, go support them.
So your money goes towards them if you stay there, I'm guessing.
It goes toward, no, there's a society involved as well. They have their own associations too. So it is towards the restoration, but some of it does have to go towards
managing
continuing
it and
this. Right. Yeah. It's a massive building. It's a lot of commitment. Yeah. And they can't do it by themselves.
No, definitely not.
And we don't need people to make apartments out of them. Or tear it down, or shopping malls. And we don't need a big ass Jesus sitting on top of the building either. So
nobody needs a big concrete Jesus. We already got one. It's in Rio de Janeiro. Go see it.
I've seen pictures.
We don't need to build another one.
No, we don't.
Well, I have watched this, like I said, I think on Ghost Hunters, the original one on Sci-Fi Channel, like ages ago. So I had not heard this story in a while. And I thought it was really interesting to hear about like tuberculosis and how like it influenced so much of society, because I don't think I've ever thought about it.
I know,
it makes a lot of sense when you bring it up, like the Victorian age where everybody looked so like gaunt and like, pale.
It makes me think of Tim Burton.
Totally. It's exactly what I'm picturing right now is like the Corpse Bride is actually what I was thinking of. Or Johnny Depp, because he's in every Tim Burton movie. Right. And they're all like that. Right. All of his characters. They are. So yeah, this was really interesting. It makes total sense to me that it would be haunted.
Oh, 1,000%.
Of any place. Like this is definitely a mecca for spiritual energy.
If this place isn't haunted, then I don't believe anymore.
Yeah. So maybe we should check it out if we want to see something paranormal. If everybody goes here, senses something, like, I don't know, maybe this has moved to the top of my list.
I don't know, but that creeper.
That's the only thing that gives me hesitancy.
I know. I don't want to run into that.
No, not at all.
One story I came across, you ran into him in the bathroom.
Oh, fuck.
Or was
while
like
you're peeing?
And like he came over the stall. Yeah, I'm like, no.
My most vulnerable
I know. That's where
position,
you get attacked by fucking sexual assaulters, not a fucking ghost man.
I do not need
I don't
that.
know. That is scary.
He has named the creeper, so.
That's true.
It fits.
Because he creeps along.
Creeps on over the stall to take a look.
Oh, man. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please go on to Apple or anywhere you can leave us a review. 5 stars, please. We'd appreciate it.
Yes.
I think you can do that on
Spotify. Allows you to leave stars. You cannot leave comments. Right. But we have noticed an uptick in Spotify listeners.
Oh my
lately.
God, a huge one.
So
it outdid Apple.
Yeah.
Recently, which is weird. So we don't know what happened there.
But we love you, Spotify listeners. Thank you for coming. And I hope you're enjoying it and keep listening.
Yep.
We are on all the social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and as long as TikTok is around.
I know, I was just about to say that.
Anyways, I won't go there. And YouTube, all at Lucid Lab Podcast, one word.
Please send in your lab reports or mini episode suggestions to lucidlabpodcast@gmail.com.
We'll be back next week with a serial killer.
Kendra.
I'm bringing a serial killer. I'm not telling you which one yet. You have to come back to find out.
It won't be as long as Fred and Rose West, but it'll definitely be as interesting.
This is a serial killer that operated in my hometown.
Yep.
So, teaser.
Good thing she's not there anymore.
And he's not there anymore.
Alrighty, guys. Have a great week.
Yes.
And in the meantime,
stay lucid.
And it's not a sanitarium. It's a sanatorium. But you're welcome. Goodbye.
Bye.